You're in the right place at the right time, stretching from the distant spaceports of Black Spire and Mos Eisley, all the way to the jewel of the core at Coruscant and the bright center of the galaxy, slamming into your holo projector like a supercharged nanoparticle of coaxium. This is the Star Wars Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, John, and my co-host is
Jason.
And we are here to bring you your needed dose of Star Wars film, TV, book, comic, gaming, and collecting news. The date is March 29th, 2021, and we got some very interesting news here regarding the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series. The main cast has been announced. Some of these names we've known for quite a while, at least a few months, like Hayden Christensen and such, but there's some new names in here and a couple familiar ones to Star Wars fans. What do you think about this cast list? And I'll let you cover some of the names here.
Well, I'm glad Joel and Bonnie are back. I mean, it was kind of, I would have hoped it would have been obvious that they would be back.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was it was kind of a shoe-in, obviously, on Joel, and I think Bonnie, obviously, if he's going to be there, she will. But yeah, to get so much more than their simple one or two lines in Attack of the Clones, you know?
Yeah.
Joel Edgerton, Bonnie Pice, however you say her name. Maybe we'll see some more of the arguing that led to him thinking Obi-Wan is a crazy old wizard.
Yeah, I want to see them yelling at each other. I want to see I want to see Owen chase him off the farm.
And it's funny because whether it's Legends or canon, every pre A New Hope Owen story has to show that happen in some shape or form. It's like Han doing the Kessel Run, or it's like all these little. It's like stealing the Death Star plans. We have to see why Owen doesn't like Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things. But no, it would be really great to expand more on Owen's character, really, because he's kind of simple in A New Hope. He's just the kind of bitter, hard-edged uncle, watching over Luke. But I'd love to learn more about his character. And
I forgot. Have they said where it's going to be timed?
Yes, it's going to be right smack in the middle between the trilogies. I think it was changed. It was originally going to be 11 BBY, and I think it might be 10 BBY now, or maybe even 9, because it changed.
So almost certainly we'll see Luke too as a little kid.
Yeah, I think
because there's gonna be the obligatory Luke gets lost or something, and
right,
or Ben saves him and brings him back to the farm, and then that's when Owen's gonna chase him off.
Right, exactly. I mean, even the original Star Wars radio drama by Brian Daley, there's a scene where Luke is explaining to 3PO while they search for R2 exactly that. There was one time Luke and his friend Wendy went off on a dewback. The dewback threw him off. They got lost in a canyon. Ben brought him back. Owen got pissed. So, yeah.
Maybe we'll see that.
Yeah, maybe we'll see that. That'd be a great tribute to Brian Daley. There's some other interesting people on here. There's a guy that people are thinking might possibly be an older Kitster. Kumail Nanjiani, or however you say his name, Nanjiani. Obviously, he looks like he would be an older Kitster. I don't think it's that big of a jump.
That'd be so wizard.
Misplaced high five.
Yeah.
.gif.
Who's playing Wald?
Yeah, who is playing Wald? Maybe Benny Safdie. No, I don't know. Other than Indira Varma from Game of Thrones season 3, I'm not terribly familiar with the other actors here.
Yeah, me neither, which is perfectly fine with me.
That's great, actually.
The only thing I know of when looking at the credits on IMDb, O'Shea Jackson Jr.
Yeah,
he was in Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Okay.
I recognize
him now. He was one of those Marines in the VTOL turbine airplane thing. Yeah, because I just saw that last night, so now I do recognize him. And then just to cap off everything, we got Rupert Friend here. We got Sung Kang, Simone Kessel, nice last name.
Yeah.
And Benny Safdie, and also Moses Ingram. That name is also familiar. I wonder what she is in. I've seen her name pop up before, and I think there's a reason she's near the top, because I think she's playing probably a major character. Oh, you know what? People, now that I remember, I think people were speculating that she might be playing Admiral Sloane, who is actually she might be a captain at this time, but she's an Imperial in the new canon stories. She's popped up in 2 or 3 novels. She's been in some comics. She's even been, I think, mentioned. Yeah, she makes an appearance in Squadrons even, and because this actress kind of looks like her, I think people have been speculating that maybe we'll see Admiral Sloane, who's been kind of building as a character that the fans really like. So who knows? Who knows? Maybe she is that character. But yeah, I'm really stoked for Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I hope it just doesn't, get too packed tight with stuff. Like, it's like when they would backfill certain in the old EU, there'd be certain things, certain like points in time where they jam so much stuff into it. So many important things happened when really not much of anything should have been happening.
Right. Like before A New Hope
and so I hope that like it's more about just Obi-Wan and what he's dealing with, and not like he's not leaving to go on galactic adventures or whatever.
I would not like to see him leave. To me, it would be more consistent with what we think happens. But of course, that might be the rug pulled out from under us where he does, and then it's like, oh,
Well, Tatooine, there's Mos Espa, there's Mos Eisley, there's places we haven't seen like Tashi Station and stuff.
Yeah,
and we can see these places, and he could do stuff just on Tatooine. So
yeah, and obviously Hayden, I don't think necessarily implies. I mean, obviously there's been hints that we're getting this Obi-Wan versus Vader fight again because
I hope not.
Like Kathleen Kennedy, I think, was the one that said we're gonna see round 2, and it's like, well, wait a second, I thought round 2 was in A New Hope.
Well, what it could be is like dream sequence, or
that's possible,
Force vision or something. Or
I was also thinking maybe we'll just see Vader doing other things off to the side and then contemplating Obi-Wan and whether he's alive or not. And then likewise with Obi-Wan, at some point he has to realize that Vader is Anakin. So obviously we'll probably have him discover that moment in this series.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting, I think, either way. It kind of reminds me of, in the Legends continuity, I didn't get around to reading these books, but there was a series called The Last of the Jedi, which is after Revenge of the Sith, and it dealt with Obi-Wan on Tatooine. But then he in this book series, he did, I think, leave and go off and do a bunch of adventures. And then and it was actually written by Jude Watson, who wrote The Jedi Apprentice and the that other post Phantom Menace book series with young Anakin and Obi-Wan. But so there was those, and then there was the book Kenobi by it was the guy that wrote the Old Republic comics. I think John Jackson Miller. Yeah, he wrote that book about Obi-Wan being on Tatooine, dealing with Sand People, and then whatever intrigue was going on there. And that was set, I think, a year after Revenge of the Sith. So it'll be interesting.
Do you think they'll change that name? Sand People?
Sand People.
It does sound a little derogatory. Although, like, in universe, Tuscan Raider would be derogatory too, I would think.
Yeah, maybe they'll call them sand persons. I don't know. Just something. Yeah.
People of sand.
People of sand. Actually, yeah, it's curious. I wonder, it's funny because each term is used almost equally. So I wonder, if there's
I don't know. It's just, I seriously wonder it, because they, it's kind of like Slave Leia, where they kind of just,
they don't want to say,
they don't acknowledge it with, they don't acknowledge it with like toys and stuff, right? Like
they used to.
No, they did.
In the 90s and 2000s, there was plenty of Slave Leia toys. Although, yes,
yeah, but I mean, in the current climate and with Disney's acquisition, they kind of,
they say Jabba's prisoner Leia. That's how they would usually term it.
Really? I didn't know that they changed the terminology. I thought they just stopped making the toys.
I know. Well, yes, they did stop making the toys, but when they do need to refer to it now, like for background photos or whatever, they just say Leia as Jabba's prisoner.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Jesus.
Isn't that what a slave is? I
Oh my
mean,
gosh.
but yeah, that's a whole other side tangent. Because yeah, I could
Well,
rant about
then,
that stuff.
hey, let's take bets because I bet that they will not use. Well, did they in the Mandalorian? I don't remember.
Did they do what?
Sand people. I
Did
don't
we see one?
recall. We
Oh
did
yeah,
at the
no, we
beginning of
did.
season
Yeah, yeah,
two. Yeah, with
yeah. No, we did. Um, I can't remember what they referred to them though as,
I
whether it
got
was
to go back
Tuscans or
now.
Sand. Yeah, we'll have
I
to
got to go
rewatch.
back.
We'll have to rewatch. But anyway, just to wrap up real quick, Obi-Wan Kenobi looking great so far. I'm more than anything, I'm excited to see Ewan because he is very passionate about returning to the role. And also, I got to throw in for Hayden also because I'm a Hayden fan. I never disliked Hayden. I thought he did. I mean, yeah, he had some cheesy lines in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, but who didn't? There's tons of cheesy lines, including ones by Ewan.
That was the
So,
point. That was how
yeah,
the movies were written, and
yes,
that was kind of the point. They were written
yes,
from a different. It's almost a different time of movie
right.
making.
So I'm looking forward to them in particular and
Yeah, and
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
If Hayden plays Vader in the suit in this, he can finally on his autographs and stuff, he can
Yeah,
write Hayden Christensen is
is
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
He doesn't have to deal with
Right,
David Prowse anymore.
right.
He can steal that
Uh,
move.
he's spinning in his grave right now, literally. He's tunneling out. So, all right, Obi-Wan Kenobi coming soon to Disney Plus, hopefully by next year. And we have other news here. Alphabet Squadron, Victory's Price is now out, the third book in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. I've not yet read the first two, and neither of us has, but
Because we're
I
too
was
busy reading old EU stuff from 25 years ago.
now, hey, what's better?
Good
But I
point.
gotta say, I wanted these to come out in paperback because this, I don't have much to say about Victory's Price other than it's out. For people that are fans of that trilogy and the Squadrons game, which ties into it, knock yourself out. I will be reading them soon, but I wanted to wait until they were all three in paperback so that I could recreate the mid 90s Star Wars EU and read a paperback trilogy front to back because really that's how I started. I mean, you and I both started with the trilogy omnibus, and
Mhm.
then I mean, some of these were omnibuses. We read the Han Solo adventures and the Lando Calrissian adventures as omnibuses, but we also read the Corellian trilogy, the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, the X-Wing books, which these are obviously the spiritual successor to those dealing with starfighter pilots. But I just miss that era of Star Wars publishing where you would get new books in paperback first. They wouldn't be in hardcover in a lot of cases, these trilogies,
Mhm.
because mass market paperbacks they were a big market share in the 90s. As technology has shifted and people read ebooks now more, mass market paperbacks are on the bottom of that totem pole. So now they don't come out first in paperback. It's always hardcover and ebook first, then paperback because it's just a secondary thing that people just don't. It's just not. It's like albums. People don't buy physical first usually unless that's like their thing, and the sales numbers are so low. The companies don't really promote that. It's just
Yeah.
like stream it, Spotify, whatever. It's kind of like that. So but I miss that. I'm a proud book sniffer, so I like the smell of newsprint on old paperbacks or new paperbacks, whatever. And yeah, it's just I don't know. It's a lost era, and
Well,
that's
I
still to
miss
this
it.
day.
I read
Yeah.
on a Kindle, but I miss. There's a lot of things I miss about paperbacks, or physical books in general. Not the
Hmm.
least of which is just knowing how much you have left. When I was reading
Yes.
Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina, finishing it up, there was, at the bottom it just shows a percentage and a bar.
Yeah.
And when I got to the end, it was like at 72%. I thought there was another, 28% of book to go. So I was like getting
Right.
all discouraged. I was like, oh man, how long is this book? But it was
Right.
all previews for the different eras of, or introductions to
Yeah.
the different eras of Star Wars books and all about the authors and
Right.
stuff like that. You don't get that.
So
You don't have to deal with that with a physical book. You can easily see and thumb
yes.
through to see what you have left.
Right. Exactly. That's something that ebooks haven't quite it doesn't translate visually yet to
Yeah.
book length. But also how like typeset is and fonts and how many words are on a page on a paperback versus an ebook. Sometimes that's slightly different. So that's another indicator of how long a book may be, you know. But speaking of Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, we have part 2 of our discussion here. We were going to do a little retrospective. It's been 25 years since the release. We had part 1 a couple weeks ago, and yeah, so we got the rest of the short stories here I want to talk about. We're going to go story by story. The last one we covered was Be Still My Heart, The Bartender's Tale. Now, what did you think of Night Lily, The Lover's Tale?
It was pretty good. It was a little bit different, which was nice.
Yeah, it's more of a horror slash romance. It's like a weird mashup of those two genres.
Yeah, and then it had the sort of the twist ending, and of course
Right.
Trevog was such a piece of shit. It was nice
Totally.
he's such an asshole. It was nice to see him get it in
Yeah,
the end.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we briefly talked about this last time just because we talked about the audio drama mostly, but which it actually expands on this short story. It's actually longer if you listen to the audio drama, I think, because it's a pretty short story by itself. And oh, I just want to throw in again, also it's by Barbara Hambly. She wrote Children of the Jedi and Planet of Twilight. And yeah, it's a good story, but I think fans will get the most out of it by listening to it. So if you get a chance, I think you can download the MP3 from Amazon. I'm not sure. You might need to order a physical copy of the cassette or CD if people remember those. But definitely check out Night Lily.
There was I can't remember which story. I think later they mention Night Lily. I don't know how you pronounce her
Mium
species name.
Onist, she is a Henimpthi from.
That's how you pronounce the race, yeah.
Yeah, Henimpthi, and I think she lives on. Well, she says I don't know if she says it in the story, but in the audio drama, she says she's going to visit her sister on Kona,
yeah,
which is actually the Arconan homeworld. But
yeah, there's a later story that implies that she has been on.
You know what?
Tatooine longer. I think it's
You're right.
I think it's the Deveronians.
Deveronians. You know what? You're absolutely right. Labria, aka Kardusai Malak, the Deveronian, he sees her either in the cantina or it might be even possibly Lady Valerian's wedding, maybe.
I think he sees her in the cantina, and it's way earlier than when she meets up with Trevog.
You are right, and I took note of that because I have my crazy conspiracy notes in my old notebook,
right?
Which I've mostly sort of transcribed to text. But this is one of those books where notes are really fun because you can pick up the inconsistencies also. Like, for example, in one of the stories, Wooher's little bartender helper Narhan is a 4-armed creature. It's described as having 4 arms. In another story, Narhan is described as being a Jawa. So it's just funny how it's Kevin J. Anderson. I have to throw this in too because we didn't talk about him last on part 1. He edited this collection, so he's obviously the one who's overseeing how everything fits together. And you're gonna make mistakes. Not everything is gonna be perfect.
It's fine. I mean, considering what she does, I mean. She could just be lying,
Oh yeah. No, actually I really like that Labria saw her because it gives an undertone of deviousness to Night Lily that obviously Trevag oversaw. Well, he oversaw a lot or missed a lot with her. But people should really read the story. I don't want to spoil it. It's a good ending. And yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm looking at the audio drama cover. And it's just so funny that it's like Obi-Wan and Luke are on it. Obi-Wan's like sitting there with his thumbs through his belt, looking.
Right.
And you just got Trevog and Night Lily there, and they're just so goddamn ugly.
Yes. And I think it was amazing that they got Drew Struzan to paint those covers for these Cantina audio dramas because at the time, I think he was under contract with Bantam or Lucasfilm licensing
Mhm.
somebody because he was doing 90% of the covers in the early to mid 90s.
And and
And
and he is
yeah,
great to follow on Facebook because
yes,
he's always posting stuff like stuff that was maybe split up as part of like several covers
yes,
to magazines and stuff, all as one piece, unreleased artwork and
yes.
stuff.
Yeah, thumbnail
He's really
sketches,
cool to
like
follow.
early versions of posters and
Yeah,
book covers.
alternate versions and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I recommend everyone check out his Facebook page. It's really good, and I'm assuming he has the same content on his Instagram. Uh, but what I was going to mention, I think one reason they obviously what they were trying to do with those audio drama covers is you have to appeal to Joe Schmo Star Wars fans. So it's like they can't just have the aliens on the covers. It's like, yeah, throw Obi-Wan and Luke on there because I mean they are
Well, they are in the
sort of connected.
cantina.
They're in the
Yeah.
cantina. It's a
Yeah.
key
So it makes
catalytic
sense.
point.
No,
It
totally.
totally makes sense. And likewise on the Band's Tale cover, you're showing the band, but you have Jabba the Hutt in a silhouette kind of thing on that picture.
Yeah.
And so, it's a major character right there. But yeah, let's talk about going right into Empire of Blues, the Deveronian's Tale by Daniel Keyes Morin, who Daniel Keyes Morin later wrote in Tales of the Bounty Hunters, he wrote Boba Fett's tale. And I think he was the author that expanded on the whole Jaster Moreel thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in this story, we learn about Labria, which is actually an alias. His real name is Cardusai Malloc, and he took part in the, what do they call it, the shelling of Montelian Sarat.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big massacre or something on Deveron, his homeworld, and which I think was basically the Empire versus Rebels. I think like he was on the Imperial side,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
because I think he's known as the Butcher of Montelian Sarat,
He
the Butcher of Bakersfield.
it just reminds me of Running Man. Labria is going to be running around
Yeah.
in a game
Um,
show.
this is a very interesting story because it jumps around a lot. You'll have a paragraph here, and then it skips ahead a couple lines, and then another paragraph. So it almost starts like a month or two before A New Hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you think of this one?
I really liked, looking at it's kind of like the surface appearance of him is obviously really demonic and stuff. So
Right.
then it's nice to delve into his background, and though he is like almost a war criminal to his
Right.
people at least.
Right.
He's like super into music. Like he's like
Oh, yeah, that's
really
right.
into music.
Really into music. He's like a collector.
So it
It's
sort
like
of
one of those
softens him.
vinyl. It's like a vinyl collector, that one of those guys that has
Oh
a secret
yeah,
warehouse of like 30,000 records or something.
he's
But it's all
super far up his own ass with his love of music. But
yes.
it softens him. And obviously they were going to do that. They were going to make him like some two-dimensional bad guy just
Right.
because he looks like a
Basically,
demon. But
right. But instead, he's a jizz connoisseur.
yeah.
I didn't realize that until just now, but he's
Uh,
he's totally into jizz, like in that
never.
way.
Don't quit saying
Jizz
that,
whaling.
please. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I like
And he gets his
how
ass kicked. You know.
he gets his ass kicked and he's a drunk. He likes his alcohol also. And actually, that goes back into one of his early appearances in Legends continuity that a lot of people don't know about. But back in 1988, there was an adventure module for the role playing game called Tatooine Manhunt, which I got in the mid 90s. And it was kind of a companion to the later Galaxy Guide 7 Mos Eisley, where a lot of that information ended up in that Galaxy Guide. But as part of this adventure module, your characters end up on Tatooine, go into the cantina, they meet Labria, and he ends up guiding them through a good portion of the adventure. And the whole time he's drunk, he's hiccuping, he's off his rocker on Corellian whiskey or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to read that adventure module and then this short story, and they fit pretty well. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Tatooine Manhunt was part of the research materials for this collection because
Oh, I would think so.
yeah, because that's what Lucasfilm licensing used to do. They used to hand out, they had their stockpile of West End Games source
Yeah.
books, and they would give them to the authors. Timothy Zahn, they first started with this with him, and then that was how Zahn became a big fan of West End games, and he collaborated with them on later role playing materials. But then also this not to go off on too long a tangent, but this Star Wars Adventure Journal also fostered this cross pollination with the Bantam authors. So you'd see them have short stories in that digest, and then likewise in just about every paperback novel in the thank you section, you'd see the West End Guys games thanked.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you would pick up on it. You'd be like, "Oh, I know that ship. That's from this source book or whatever." So, anyway, I just had to mention that
one other detail in this story that I liked, just as kind of like I mean, I don't think that there was a particular reason why they added this, but the whole thing with his teeth, he had two sets of teeth.
Yeah, it was weird, huh?
It was almost like something that they later they fixed the inconsistency with Ponda Baba's arm.
Right.
It's almost like that. It's almost like they had to fix some continuity error with his teeth, but they didn't. It's just something that they just gave him.
Weird.
You know,
he has two rows of teeth, like in his. It's very interesting because obviously it's a human playing him in the movie, so you have regular, normal-looking teeth. But then in a lot of sources, a lot of artwork and this and that, he has these sharp.
Oh, is that the continuity issue?
I think because I mean, also he's supposed to have more devilish teeth, so they should be vampiric, I guess. But I didn't really quite think of that though until you mentioned, and then maybe that's what they were doing.
I was trying to think back because there wasn't a lot of material other than the West End games that he would show up in.
Not a lot. It was a lot of artwork. It was mostly just Cantina materials. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does show up again in Tales of the Bounty Hunters. In the Boba Fett story, he has a pretty big role in that.
Yeah.
But because I think 15 years after the Battle of Endor, Boba Fett captures Cardi Simelok after hunting him off and on for like decades.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a whole other thing we'll go into if we ever review that. Yeah. But it was great that they had the consistency to have that also be written by Daniel Keyes Morin. And I just got to say it's a really funny story. One of my favorites in the book, I think. Not quite sure about the writing style. It's not quite my thing, but it's definitely amusing and it ties into a lot of the other short stories. So
yeah,
it's good in that regard. And then we got Kevin J. Anderson. He also contributed a story to his own collection that he edited called Swap Meet, The Jawa's Tale. This is apparently the Jawa. We might see him in a couple movie scenes, if I remember, but he's the one at the table that reacts with the Ranat to Han shooting Greedo.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like, oh, and they kind of look over because they're doing a little deal in their.
Such a good impression of a Jawa.
But that's the sound it makes, it's like a questioning Jawa noise. And actually, we'll just talk at the same time about Rebecca Moesta's story, Trade Winds, the Ranat's Tale, because they're both they both are sequential. They both are highly connected.
Yeah.
Rebecca's story is only 4 or 5 pages long.
Right.
It's kind of a throwaway, sort of.
Oh, come on.
Well, I mean a throwaway in that it's not important. Not like literally a throwaway.
Kevin J. Anderson's going to come over and kick your ass.
No, hey, they're both great people. I've followed them on social media too. They're good people. And they're both great friends with Neil Peart. Because obviously Kevin collaborated with Neil on lots of things. But now this was an interesting story because you see Jawa society, you see their little havens. They have their big what do they call it? That great meet or whatever it is, like where it's like a big swap meet, where all the sand crawlers come. And
I don't remember. I read it a couple days ago, and I what to call it.
Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff like that, and then basically this Jawa ends up in the cantina through circumstance. Really, he's totally he sees what the Empire. Oh, and there was the whole scene where he meets with Ben Kenobi.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, they meet up while he's burning the Jawas that were killed by the Imperials.
That's a great scene. Yeah. I felt like it was written well. I could hear Alec Guinness on the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
What's some other little things you remember in this one or overall?
Well, I was wondering. I can't remember. How do you pronounce that stupid?
Wimatika.
Wimatika. he was like one of the clan leaders for his clan, right?
Yes.
For Het
Yes.
and Kit's clan.
Yeah.
And
Nikik, yeah, however you say his name.
Was he there? I can't remember if he was there when he was burning the bodies.
You know,
when Ben was burning the bodies.
Don't
because it
remember.
becomes kind of
it's kind of connected to the moisture farmer's tale. It's kind of tied
it's kind
in
of inconsistent. It seemed to me because although I guess the moisture farmer happened before.
A lot of that story is before A New Hope.
Yeah, and
so I think it does work out.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and reread
notes,
them both, but
yeah,
even though
I think I can find out in my notes. Yeah,
but Wimmatika he doesn't seem consistent between the two. Like if the moisture farm stuff happened before, Het was getting antsy about confronting the Imperials.
Yes,
and it seems like he would have a different attitude. Although, I don't suppose he would actually have a different attitude, right? He would be even more hesitant to do anything.
Maybe dig his heels in like a typical Jawa.
But he doesn't mention it outright, which is fine, I guess.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be telling Het and Kick. I guess that's how I'd say it. And Kick.
Het and Kick. Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe the N is silent. Het, Kick.
Well, it's interesting because if it's an N like that, it reminds me of Swahili. Because if there's a consonant. If there's two consonants like that at the beginning of a word, you would just you wouldn't put like a
like
what sound
like almost like the Gwen, you know, instead of
you would say kick, not kick. You wouldn't put like a vowel.
Right.
I wonder. Oh man, we gotta figure this out.
We gotta delve into Jawaese here.
Yeah, we gotta figure out the correct pronunciation of these stupid Jawa names. Het, I suppose he wouldn't have been at the wedding because he's just a pissant Jawa, and he
pissant Jawa. I think they all are.
Well, really, but he's not in the inner circle. He's not an elder, a Jawa elder.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I'd almost rather read the Moisture Farmer tale first and then go back and read Swap Meet.
It might be interesting to jump around like that.
I'll have to make a note so when I read this again in 25 more years, when I'm
2051
65 years old rereading this stupid book, I'll read it in the order that I wanted to.
Yes.
Anyway, that's it. I like the story. It was kind of cool to have three stories, boom boom boom, that are like so tight far as the Swap Meet, and then it ends on kind of a cliffhanger type thing, and then the Renat's story, like kind of pushes that cliffhanger even more without resolution. And then in Davin Felth's
great transition, let's talk about When the Desert Winds Turn, the Stormtrooper's Tale. So this is by Doug Beeson, who I'm not sure of his credentials. I know he's not written any Star Wars up to this point. This is a great story about Davin Felth, who basically we see his journey from training at Karita to be a stormtrooper, but it's almost like accelerated training because it doesn't mention that he's been there for like years. It's like he has like 6 months of accelerated, probably
that's kind of what it implies. Yeah.
It's
just 6 months.
It's like 6 months, but he starts out as an AT-AT pilot, and then there's a whole scene where he takes the AT-AT out on a scouting run, basically, or what he thinks is training with his instructor. The instructor goes into the back cabin, and then they start getting attacked by airspeeders. He doesn't know if it's still part of the training or if it's a projection or whatever. So he attacks them, and he quickly learns that the AT-AT's legs are vulnerable, which thanks for the Imperial engineering that didn't point that out. When they try to use, do they actually try using tow cables, or maybe they just shoot the legs and then he bends down or something?
No, they just fly under him where he can't even track them.
That's right.
He can't track them.
That's right. So then he presents this problem to I don't know if it's still General Veers then or if it's Captain Veers.
It was Colonel.
Colonel Veers.
I believe it was Colonel Veers. And it was kind of, I didn't like that at all.
It was too on the nose, I think, to have those.
Yeah, well, I didn't. The fact that it was Veers, is fine. That I didn't mind that, but the whole
let's just point out for our casual listeners that General Veers is the AT-AT commander in The Empire Strikes Back, just so they know. There you go.
Yeah. and Donovan in
Yes, in Last Crusade.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Don't trust anybody, Dr. Jones. Anybody.
I didn't like that cover up thing. I thought it was dumb.
Yeah.
It was kind of like it was too big of an Easter egg. Like having Veers is kind of an Easter egg. But they wouldn't have cared, because how often would they worry about that? The tow cable things.
Right.
Every weapon has a vulnerability of some sort, and that's so specific. Like, how many times are they going to run into
air speeders with tow cables,
an opposing force that has tow cables like that? It's not. It's just a non-issue. Like, and it's and the thing is, that didn't even like turn the tide at the Battle of
Empire
Hoth.
Strikes Back. Yeah, I know.
They still overran the base. They only took out, like, at least as far as in the movie's concerned, I think they took out one AT-AT with that.
Yeah. As far as the movies, maybe
at least on screen.
Yeah, but too, if you count Luke's lightsaber thing, but or his little grenade.
Yeah, but it's like, what are you going to do then? I mean, it's a freaking Jedi in training with a lightsaber.
You expect me to take on the Empire with a laser sword?
Well, yes, we actually. God damn you, Ryan Johnson. But it just wasn't an issue. So, like, I didn't really like that angle, that Easter egg of, and it was a cool way to get him washed out of it.
Yeah.
And to get him bitter against, his situation, and to show like how things can happen in the military like that. Yeah. But it just didn't. I didn't.
It is
care.
A bit much.
I didn't care for it much.
So then it jumps ahead. He almost immediately he is transferred to be a standard stormtrooper, and he takes part in the search for the droids on Tatooine during A New Hope. So they go down in the Imperial lander. I mentioned the reasoning behind the dewbacks. That was actually kind of cool when I think it was Captain Tarek, his superior officer, says, "Oh yeah, we're going to grav lift some dewbacks in from Mos Eisley. They can cover more ground than we can on foot, and they handle the terrain really well." So, but the other thing is, though, also is that just the stormtroopers that were already stationed there, because obviously they're not just going to automatically know how to ride a dewback. So it must be the ones that were already on Tatooine for a while.
Yeah.
But I like that we see them scouring the desert. Sure enough, Davin Felth is the one that says, "Look, sir, droids." And Captain Tarek is the one that says, someone was in the pod. I loved that scene in this book, because I think that was when I first read this when I was 15, that was one of those that really expanded a particular scene really well, where it led right up to it. We get to know these characters, and then bam, there's a scene, visually. So when I read it, you can just hear the lines.
Yeah.
And that was great.
And there's that build up to, like, oh, he's gonna say it. He's gonna be the one.
And then there's a couple false starts, because at one point he even unearths a rock.
Oh, right.
Thinking it's part of a droid or escape pod. But sure enough, circumstance leads. Well, first I think he takes part in the attack on either the Lars farm or I think the Lars farm. They end up there. We see more of the confrontation.
It was both. I think he was at the Sandcrawler and the Lars farm, because it's a build-up, right, to him just getting more and more disillusioned with the Empire and his role in it. So,
yeah, but yeah, he starts to see the true colors of the Empire, and that's a very powerful scene. I mean, because we sympathize obviously with the Jawas, because they're rather helpless, and we see those precise Imperial shots on their treads that Obi-Wan describes in the movie.
Right.
But it was a great scene when you see Captain Tarek facing Owen, and Beru is off to the side crying, and Owen like spits in the face of Captain Tarek. That was a great lead up to what we know is coming.
Yeah.
Because I think before this, we had never seen in any story when Owen and Beru, or just before they were taken out. So this, other than troops, this was the only other version of that. Bad boys, what you gonna do?
The original fan film.
Yeah, that was a great one. But anyway, so then circumstance leads them to Mos Eisley. Sure enough, Davin Felth is one of the stormtroopers who comes into the cantina
Of
to
course.
investigate a disturbance. And
I'm surprised. I'm surprised he wasn't also one of the stormtroopers at the blockade to the city when
I know.
when Ben does the Jedi mind trick.
It was so many. The fate of the Force was guiding him. But then so then the stormtroopers, they're done in the cantina. They talk to Wu or whatever. The old man and the boy are gone. The stormtroopers go back out, and we see the resolution of the Jawa's tale by Kevin J. Anderson. Now I won't spoil it, but again, it's the resolution to that tale. So
you can imagine.
You can imagine. And then
really, you're gonna worry about spoilers?
yeah, I know it has been 25 years, but I do think if someone has heard this, they should really read these. These are really good.
Yeah.
They'll get a lot out of it.
It's a trilogy within a anthology.
Right. It is. And so then he ends up at Docking Bay 94. Han Solo's going to blast his way out, and sure enough, there's another catalytic moment of decision that happens here, where Davin Felth decides the path that he's going to take within the Empire. Now, I wish this is something that had been expanded on later in later stories, because sadly, this is the end of Davin Felth's story for the rest of Legends continuity, other than we suppose that he gave the tow cable idea to the Rebels.
Yeah.
Which at least there's that. But it would have been great to see more of him in future stories. I don't know. Maybe I'll write some Davin Felth fan fiction for everybody.
He's next to be recanonized right after Thrawn. He's high on the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's nice that he took out Captain Tarek.
Yeah, no,
it was nice that he got taken out.
Yeah, that was.
He
It's funny because when I watch that scene, there's a lot going on, and you can almost kind of piece together who Captain Tarek might be if you frame by frame the shots and everything. Yeah. So it is interesting to kind of look at it from that point of view. But I got to say, this might be my favorite story in the anthology, I think, mostly for the events that it covers, not necessarily the writing per se, which is just serviceable. So, yeah. What did you think about that one overall?
I liked it. The only thing I didn't like was the whole Colonel Veers sweeping under the rug the vulnerability of the AT-ATs. I thought that was kind of silly.
It's a bit much.
But overall, I liked it, and I liked just watching the progression of him in boot camp, and it just like it gets worse and worse and worse for him until finally he's just like, F it, you know.
Frack it. Definitely. That was a really interesting story. Speaking of interesting, Jennifer Roberson, her story Soup's On, The Pipe Smoker's Tale. This one is very different. What did you think of this particular story?
It was a nice change up, right? From the previous. It was one of those like
very different.
I'd say like just I guess it's one of those things that's written in an interesting way. That's nice to take in as a short story. You know, it's not something you could expand out to like a novel, right? But it's nice to have these little experimental writing styles for these short stories.
Han Solo soup.
Yeah. What else could you say? Just soup.
Yeah, soup.
You only see Danik Jericho for like a split second.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see him once or twice?
When you get a good shot of him. Well, he's there at the bar when Luke scans the bar. He's sitting at the edge, just kind of.
And you see a pretty close shot of him.
And you see a great
in wide
shot
shots too.
Yeah, in the widescreen or now current Blu-ray Disney Plus version, you see him. In a really good...
I got my pan and scan Blu-rays.
You pan and
Should
scan
I have
Blu-ray.
gotten the widescreen?
Yeah, maybe so. But no, there's a great shot of him when Obi-Wan picks up Luke and says, "This is Chewbacca. He has a ship that blah blah blah." And then the camera you see Luke look at Chewie, and the camera wipes right before then. He's right there on the left side smoking his pipe, right next to, I think, that little dwarf guy. So that's a great shot. And there's a bunch of behind the scenes images of Danik Jericho. The CCG card had a really good picture of him.
Oh yeah.
Um, his species, the Anzadi, who are like these basically energy vampires, or that's what he's going for. He calls it everybody's soup, but it's basically these tendrils fold out from his cheeks, and they literally shoot up somebody's nose and suck their brains out. And it's this crazy thing which he's trying to hold back. He's trying to savor particular kinds of people's quote unquote soup.
Yeah.
So he knows that Luke has this. It seems like force sensitive people have more soup for whatever reason. So, he's looking at Luke and Ben Kenobi, and he's like, "Oh, they have soup. Han Solo has soup, and he wants it." And
He really wants Han's soup.
he really wants Han soup. It's almost a poetic kind of. The writing is almost like a little romantic in a way, and I guess
Well,
it
it's
is like a
it's
vampire.
almost written to beats.
Yeah. And I think Jennifer Robinson continued Danik Jericho's story in Tales from Jabba's Palace, because I think he has his own story in that, even though he's not there in the movie for whatever. Oh, I know what it is. He's hunting people throughout Jabba's Palace as, trying to get people soup in that story. But that's another thing we'll talk about another time. I think that's all I got to say about that story. It's not very long. It's interesting. I didn't care for it when I first read it when I was a teenager. I like it more now for what it is, but it's just kind of an interesting anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I liked it. I don't remember how I felt about it the first time I read it. I think I was, at the time, for the most part, we'd be happy reading anything Star
just
Wars.
about. Darksaber. Yeah,
so thirsty, so thirsty for Children of the Jedi.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I definitely liked it now.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Boshek's story now.
And who is Boshek again?
He's the balding spaceman at the bar.
Hair challenged spaceman with the mutton chops.
Norwood. I think he's like Norwood 4 or something like that, whatever they call it.
Right.
At the crossroads, the Spacer's Tale.
Jerry Olteon.
Yeah, I don't know.
Never heard that name.
Yeah, never heard it before. Never will again.
Yeah. This one was interesting because he beats Han's Kessel Run record right away.
When he mentioned it at the beginning of the story, I thought it was going to be because it's been so long since I watched it or since I read it. I mean, I couldn't remember if that was like a major point in the story, like he was going to actually talk to Han, and Han was going to be like, "Oh no, what do you mean? You beat it? You did, 13. Right. I did 12." Like, and then Boshek would be like, "Oh, I thought I beat you." Right. But it was just like that. That was it.
That was it. It was never
doesn't even say what he did. It doesn't. And he never thinks to himself what he beat it by.
Right.
What his time or distance was or whatever.
Right. So, doesn't he talk to Chewie, and Chewie kind of is like pissed off or something like that?
Yeah, but it was he kind of. I think he just says like, I beat your time or whatever.
Right. Chewie's
just like,
oh yeah, it says right here the Kessel Run. Boshek said, grinning, quote, "I beat your time by a 10th, and I had to take out 4 TIE fighters when I got here to boot."
Oh, so he did say by a 10th. So he does
by a 10th. So 12.4. I don't know, or something like that. But that's, I don't know. It's weird, but who knows? Maybe the whole thing is a miscalculation, whether Han or
it's not canon now.
It's not canon. Yeah, that's right.
It's a non-issue now.
That's right. But this is an interesting story because I always wanted to learn more about this guy when I used to watch the movie as a kid. And I mean, you see him talk to Ben, and he recommends Chewie and kind of waves to him, and then that's it. And it's like, who is this dude? And it's like, it starts off action packed. He flies down, takes out some TIE interceptors, flying through the canyon, and then gets to the cantina, and it's like, oh, whoa, okay. And then the stormtroopers come in, if I recall, and he knows that he's like, they're looking for him, or he thinks it's him they're focused on. So then he has to like hide and puts on a preacher's robe or whatever, and tries to basically escape the stormtroopers. And it's funny because the whole time they're not really looking for him; they're still focused on the droids. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. It was interesting, and
it's a good story, but I mean, they sort of implied that he had force ability, you know.
Yes.
And I remember
Yes.
in particular his CCG card from the Decipher game. He
Yeah.
had, high force power or whatever.
Right.
Force sensitive, I think the card
Yeah.
says.
It's cool that Decipher wrote that into the stats.
Yeah. It kind of comes off as the author like playing him up too
Yeah,
much.
that's what I felt.
Like, oh,
Kind of like
he's better
Dab
than
and Filth.
Han. Yeah, kind of. He beat Han's time. He's force sensitive. He could be trained as a Jedi potentially. I mean, I don't know how much the author was trying to say.
Right.
How many midi-chlorians he had or whatever.
Right, because when he says, when he recommends Chewie, Ben says something to him.
Yeah, they have like an
kinda
exchange
sticks in
and
his
he
head.
talks. Yeah, they talk about the force and stuff.
Right.
And
right.
there's at the end when he's evading the stormtroopers and stuff, he runs into the the blockade at the edge of the city or whatever.
Right.
And there's sort of I guess you'd call it like an echo of Ben's force persuasion that he kind of like unlocks. It's kind of I guess implied that he sort of
he caused the repetition.
Caused the echo.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I didn't care for that much.
Yeah, it seemed a bit much for just
he got played up.
Spacer. Yeah.
It came off. That sort of stuff comes off as fan fiction.
Yeah, and like, maybe that's why
self-insert / fan fiction stuff.
That's possibly why we never heard from Jerry Olteon again in Star Wars fiction.
He pissed someone off.
Although,
Lucasfilm.
Interestingly enough, Boshek did appear in a Tales comic that was ambiguous in its canonicity, but then later put in Legends continuity collections. So it is in Legends. It ended up being canon.
Yeah.
He had I think it was a post A New Hope Tales comic where he and this one woman have some adventure and evade the Empire and typical action adventure kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it was cool to see him again in Tales, but otherwise Boshek has not been greatly expanded,
which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Aside from the issues with the story that I have, he's kind of his like look and everything. The fact that he knows or recommended Han and Chewie to Ben. It's all kind of interesting.
Yeah.
He was like a hair away from having a speaking line.
Right.
In the movie.
Exactly. Yeah. For all intents and purposes, he might have, if his ship might have been good, he might have been the one taking Ben and Luke and the droids.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't his ship.
Yeah.
That was the other issue. It was the Monastery ship.
It was the monasteries, the Dimyu monks, which ties into RPG background stuff in Mos Eisley because
did they mention them in particular? I don't think they did in the story.
I think he just says monks.
He just says monks and the monastery, but he never like specifies.
Yeah,
who it is.
I think it's implied if you know the background materials from Galaxy Guide 7 Mos Eisley, it is the Dimyu monks because they're in town and they specialize in altering starship transponders illegally. Yeah. On like as a behind the facade kind of thing for their monastery.
Right.
So I think that's obviously what it is, but it's not stated implicitly in the story. But
I'll tell you what, Docking Bay 94 is for some reason. Like it wasn't even. He's like driving around. That stuck out to me. That he's driving around.
Right.
And of course it's Luke's old speeder.
Yes, that's right. It is, huh?
Yeah. That's what it is. He connects too many things specifically.
Yeah.
And he, he's like, it wasn't like, he like rounded the docking bays. It was like, he was driving around Docking Bay 94.
Right. And there's literally hundreds of docking bays all over Mos Eisley.
Clearly, there's at least 94 of them.
Yeah, it goes through 1, 2, and 94. That's
right.
It. Yeah.
The only other thing that stuck out was when he's at the bar and he's like watching the confrontation between Han and Greedo. There's at one point he's kind of imagining, or he's trying to figure out what Han's saying or whatever. He's like imagining what Han's saying, and he like imagines that he's saying "so long, sucker," and I'm just like, nobody says that. Like,
no.
Why why are you putting this in the story?
That's like something that like cartoon characters would say in the 1940s as they, shoot their 6-shooter or something. Like it's just not a modern convention, or even in a 70s or 80s movie. It's just kind of
right. It's just kind of
cartoony.
silly. But
It's silly.
the whole story is kind of silly. It's too interconnected. He's
Yeah.
too they're threading too much in that one
Yes.
particular story.
Yes.
And I didn't like that he maybe beat Han and Chewie's Kessel Run.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially, obviously it's different continuity, but especially after seeing Solo, that would just be after everything they did on that Kessel Run. That would just be
after seeing Solo. There's no way he beat it. There's no way he beat it. The way they beat it in that movie.
No way. So, I don't have much else to say about that story.
Yeah, Boshek, 2 thumbs down.
2 thumbs down. Yeah, it's just like whatever. It's passable.
Yeah.
And then we have Dr. Death, the tale of Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba, or Evazan, as I've heard it pronounced in one of the audio dramas, by Kenneth C. Flint. Now, Kenneth C. Flint was contracted to write actually an entire full-length Star Wars hardback in, I think, 1993 or 94, which didn't come out, although it was finished, and you can actually read it online for free. The what was totally unpublished. It was going to be called Heart of the Jedi, and it was going to be a Luke, Han, and Leia story set after, I think, right after the Truce at Bakura. It was going to be a follow-up to that. And I don't know the basics of the story other than it was just like Luke, Han, and Leia fighting splinter groups of the Empire or whatever.
Right.
But
typical.
Yeah, but he did, from the interviews I've read with him online on this website that hosted the story, he did get paid to write it. So Lucas Licensing did give him his money for the work he did, even though it went unpublished. And he didn't really get a clear understanding of why it wasn't published, other than possibly the schedule being crammed with already like Kevin J. Anderson and, Kathy Tyers. Maybe it just didn't fit in. But I'm curious to eventually read it one of these days. I started to a while back and it seemed all right.
I remember like a few months ago, somehow I went down the rabbit hole and ran across that entry about Flint and his canceled book.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I got there. Maybe I was just looking at canceled books in general for the old EU.
If you look on Wikipedia, I think there's a whole section on unpublished or canceled novels, short stories, and other content.
Yeah. And it's interesting that he was able to release it eventually.
Right. It was cool that, I mean, it's basically considered fan fiction because it wasn't official. But what I like is,
you know what?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
If he got paid to write it, it's not fan fiction.
And it was edited.
I
think
it says in the entry that he edited it to fit into the existing ODU.
Oh yeah, for sure. I am curious to read the whole thing, and because I've been wanting to read some post Return of the Jedi stuff, hopefully this year. So I'm hoping to finish after because I read like the first chapter, so I'm curious. But anyway,
and that, assuming that you can get it in a in a format that is well supported on an ebook reader, that is one of the advantages of having an ebook reader.
Yes, absolutely,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So he wrote Dr. Death, The Tale of Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba. This one is interesting because you think if we're going to read about those characters, it's going to be just like all the others. It's going to be in the cantina as they have their movie scene, as Ben chops off the arm of Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan, tries to rough up Luke.
Yeah, it's either going to lead into it or lead out from it directly.
Yes, that's not the case. This is entirely a separate scenario, not even on Tatooine, which I kind of like. This movie is this is like an old 1930s horror movie where there's like a castle on some rainy planet. It's very Frankenstein. And I think on the timeline, it's about 6 months after A New Hope, because Ponda Baba has lost his arm already. And he's trying to get Dr. Evazan to graft him with a cybernetic arm or some kind of replacement or something. And there's these characters, it's a family who are all trained as these like commandos, and they're trying to get their revenge because of the botched surgeries that Dr. Evazan has has committed on someone they knew or a close relative or
The
something.
main guy's father, I think, or something.
That could be
I
it.
don't remember. I just remember they were all like thin, dark-skinned, and swarthy. Is
Yeah,
how they
and
were described.
right, and it was like the mother was piloting the shuttle that was dropping off each of them, but they're kind of taken out one by one, if I remember, and until there's one guy left near the end. But I also wanted to mention that there's this whole subplot of because this takes place on Ondo, which is the Aqualish
Mhm.
homeworld, and there's this subplot where the senator of Ondo is trying to he's funding Dr. Evazan in this crazy weird laboratory, which is like Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory,
Mhm.
and there's this weird mind transference device or something where he Dr. Evazan, what is it he's gonna do? Is like
He wants to transfer the mind from one person to another, which and then the idea is that if the Aqualish give that to the Empire, it will buy their freedom or whatever.
right,
Some weird thing like that.
something
Um,
like that.
but it's weird because it you would think it would just be it transfers one mind to the other, like it swaps, right? That's
Yeah,
what you would think it would do, but it doesn't actually do that. Um,
exactly.
one overwrites the other, and that's it.
Right. So there's a funny thing what happens to the senator and Ponda Baba, and yeah, just overall, it's a very macabre story, and I like that it's a change of pace. And it's, I think when I first read it, I was just kind of like, it was all right. But as time has gone on, and I've reread the anthology over and over, I really look forward to this one every time. It's just like
Well, because how many
so
times can you read about someone else's
viewpoint,
viewpoint of the same thing?
the
I
same,
mean,
yeah,
so long. We had so long sucker in
yeah,
the last story. I don't need to
right.
see Han shooting Greedo from another
Right,
viewpoint.
right. That's so true. And I've always loved Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba. So that's like one of, obviously I've talked about how much I love the Cantina, but like there's something about their characters. They're just so over the top, ridiculous, like villains, like just like thugs, just total thugs. They're gonna mess with the poor innocent farm boy coming into the big town for the first time. It's like they're just total a-holes. And
Yeah,
so
and it's funny
it's
that
just
by the point that we catch up with them in the Tales story later on,
yeah,
Ponda Baba is not happy with Dr. Evazan. He's like pissed.
yeah, yes. And that kind of ties into other things. There was a role-playing adventure, I don't know what you call it, kind of like a story idea or a short adventure in, again, Galaxy Guide 7, Mos Eisley, where you're trying to avoid Dr. Evazan, and at the same time, Ponda Baba is tracking the doctor, trying to get his revenge for his arm that has been botched because keeps trying to get him some kind of replacement. So it's this ongoing thing that never gets resolved. And when I saw them in Rogue One, that was one of the most crazy, weird scenes I wasn't expecting, was to see them on
Yeah,
Jeddah like shortly before New Hope. And it's also funny that
presumably
like
they got off. They were like on their
presumably they
way.
got off.
They were on
Yeah,
their way
and
out at that
I
point.
just think it's funny that like they kind of switch roles in Rogue One, where Evazan is the one that gets bumped into, and then Ponda Baba is like trying to calm him down.
Right,
Whereas
right.
it's like the other way around when they're in the cantina, where like Ponda Baba gets kind of like in Luke's face first.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't think I have much else to say about the story. Anything else? It's
Well,
an
do you want to
interesting
talk
one.
about the ending, or are we not spoiling
Yeah,
the 25-year
yeah.
old book?
Okay, here's your spoiler warning. Go read it. You really should. But yeah, let's talk about the ending.
Well, because you would think as the reader that it just swaps the minds. It doesn't do that. It overwrites one with the other, and Dr. Evazan got it wrong and swapped it the wrong way.
Right.
And because it was going to be Ponda Babas. Oh, well, that's the other thing is this story explains the continuity issue
The
with
arm.
the Aqualish arms.
That's
How
true. And they
there's two different like
subspecies.
yeah, subspecies, I guess you'd call it. One
You know,
has a
I
flipper and the
think
other one has a clawed arm.
yes, like clawed arm. I think that was originally in Galaxy Guide for Alien Races. I think
Hmm.
that was the first source that said there's these two Aqualish, if I remember correctly.
Probably.
And
Most of the continuity smoothing, the actual continuity smoothing stuff happened in the role playing
West
books.
End,
Yeah, the
yeah,
West
and
End
actually,
stuff, because everything, all this stuff
interestingly,
draws from those source
yeah,
books.
interestingly enough, that Galaxy Guide, written first edition, was written in 1990. I believe that was written by Troy Denning, who
Mm.
later, of course, was a New Jedi Order author and wrote
Mm-hmm.
many other Star Wars novels. But he started early in his writing publication career. He was a West End Games writer, and he wrote a few books for them. So anyway, yeah, there's the Flipper Aqualish and the Clawed Arm Aqualish. I think the Flipper ones are the dominant species. They're the
They're the
ones in
higher
positions of
caste.
power. Yeah. And the
So he was
clawed arm
gonna
ones.
he was
Yeah.
gonna copy Ponda into the senator's body,
Right.
and then, or that's what Ponda wanted.
Yes.
Because Evazan wanted to transfer into like a young, healthy human that didn't have a messed up face.
Yeah, someone with a
stuff.
non-mangled face, which, according to another Western Games story vignette, a little short thing, I guess was a blaster shot that kind of half melted his face, fired by Jodo Kast, which is
Of course.
the guy that had the Mandalorian armor that impersonated Boba Fett very
Right.
often.
Yeah.
So yeah, blaster shot, that'll make you look like that.
Anyway, so Ponda gets excited because he's like, well, why don't you just transfer me into the senator
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And then it just doesn't work out the way they thought, because it went the wrong way. And
Yes.
the senator went into Ponda Baba's
Right.
body. Presumably, the senator's body and Ponda Baba, his mind, are just gone, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And
then there was this weird thing with Dr. Evazan had this creature. What was it called again? Was it Fido? It was like this amorphous
Fido. Close. It's Rover.
Rover.
Was the name,
Okay,
but the creature was a Medusa.
That's
That was
right.
the name of the species.
Right, and it was like this amorphous kind of blob that would literally just cover people and could kill them and could kind of move around. And now that I think about it, I think this is a reference to The Prisoner, which is there's that floating white orb, which is a balloon on the old 60s TV series, The Prisoner, and it would just cover guys and then like drain their energy. And it was called Rover, I think. It was either Fido or Rover. I think it was Rover.
Oh,
and I think that's what this is a reference to. So The Prisoner, look up The Prisoner. I think it's 1967. Anyway, yeah, or you could even Google Rover The Prisoner, and you'll see it.
We gotta run into Kenneth Flint at some convention or book signing so I can ask him.
Yes, it's my life's dream. Yeah, I don't have much else to say.
It was a good story.
Good story. Yeah, and kind of and of course in the very end, Evazan, you think, blows up with this thermal detonator that takes off the whole roof, but turns out he fell down and onto Rover's kind of bouncy amorphous body on the rocks below. So
right.
Rover, I believe, died, but Dr. Evazan survived because he was inside of him, sort of. So, and we need to see him again. I don't think. Well, you know what?
That's the thing too.
He's in a Galaxy of Fear book shortly after.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, I think the first one or the second one.
Do you know if Ponda Baba shows up? Because that's kind of ambiguous.
I don't think he does.
Dead,
I don't think Ponda Baba shows up in that book. But what's interesting is it's implied that Dr. Evazan dies in that book. I think he gets shot or taken out by what's supposed to be Boba Fett, but then has been retconned to be Jodo Kast, supposedly. So again, some interesting little continuity things there.
Anyway. The only other thing, this story's got a lot of stuff.
It does.
It's interesting that it's a senator, right? It's an Aqualish senator, not an imperial senator. It must be the local government, like the planetary government.
I think that's often the case. Like, in other words, he would have been representing the old Imperial Senate before it was what was the word? Discontinued, abolished, dissolved by Palpatine. Yeah. But yeah, obviously when that happened, the Imperial senators took over as representing that planet for the Empire.
Well, the boss,
but obviously
the governors, not the senators. But
right.
So, but he still holds power. So there must be some local government. It's interesting to think about how that worked, right? Like, did each planet just sort of have, like, they they had like a maybe like a planetary like prefect or
I was
something
gonna
that from
say,
the Empire that controlled things, but
I think it's implied that each planet still has a local liaison that works
yeah,
directly under the Moff. That
yeah,
way, if they need to talk to the populace directly through someone they know who is not going to. But of course, what happens is those officials end up becoming corrupted by the Empire because they have to, because their arms are twisted to
right.
follow the Imperial decree.
That makes
So,
sense.
yeah, it is an interesting thought, though, because he is an Aqualish, he is a senator, presumably representing Ondo. So,
He was one
yeah,
of the ones that was doing the hand motion when
in the
what was
Phantom
it? Is in
Menace.
the Phantom Menace? Yeah, when they're
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
Republic Senate.
right. Yeah, vote now, vote now.
Yeah.
um, yeah, because there is some Aqualish in the background there. Who knows? Maybe it was him. Um,
Anyway,
anyway, God, we had a long talk about Doctor Death, but that's a great story. I'd give it a B plus, I think.
thumbs
Um,
up.
yeah, thumbs up. And then we have Drawing the Maps of Peace, The Moisture Farmer's Tale by M. Shane Bell. Another unknown Star Wars author who I don't think continued any other future stories. But this is an interesting one because we don't quite know who this character is. There's been speculation that he's one of the older guys in the cantina, the older humans. But I think it's all been discounted by official sources, whether it's Pablo Hidalgo or whatever. So it's just kind of, I don't think it's anyone actually there. It's just purely like for the story.
And
I
that's
don't think we
weird.
can. It is weird. It is weird because you would think they would just pick someone actually there in the movie.
Yeah,
But
what the fuck, Pablo?
yeah,
What's the
I
deal?
don't know. I don't know what's going on. But
Did he get pinged about that on like a bad day, one of his bad days? And he's like,
yeah, no.
no, he's not in there. What?
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah. Seriously. What do you think about this one? This kind of jumps around. There's a long timeline where it starts like months before
Yeah,
where it ends.
I liked it because it was like the other ones that we both liked. It's different, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It shows the relationship between the Empire, the settlers, and the indigenous races
hmm
of Tatooine.
Yeah.
And how there's the manipulation by the Empire to just keep stoking the discontent between the farmers and the indigenous
Right.
population because it
Right.
serves them.
Yes.
The division serves them.
Right. Because Tatooine is full of valuable resources like sand,
Moisture.
moisture. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go to
uh,
the desert planet. There's tons of moisture there.
uh,
No,
well,
but actually,
Krayt
yeah.
dragon pearls, right?
Trade
You got
dragon
those things.
pearls.
Maybe they like
Right,
those.
sure. No, actually, according to the background lore from again, Galaxy Guide 7, Mos Eisley, I think is the original source. Tatooine does have a significant amount of ore under the rock and the planet that was, I think, useful for starship building, but it was had strange magnetic properties. And so there used to be a space station above Tatooine, like 300 years before New Hope, and this magnetic ore caused a large ship to crash into the space station and the whole thing blew up. And so Tatooine had a boom of mining like hundreds of years in the past. And then actually that's where the sand crawlers come from because
Right.
they were put onto the planet by I believe Corellian Engineering Corporation. The sand crawlers are actually Corellian designed mining vehicles.
Yeah, I remember that
And
from somewhere.
yeah, it might even say it in this story, possibly, or one of the short stories in the anthology. And so when the mining boom ended and the space station blew up, all the obviously Tatooine's stock fell, and they had a big crash. And then they just, rather than lift the sand crawlers out, they just left them there, and the Jawas overtook them, and they became their traveling warrens, I guess, or
Yeah.
traveling little shops, living
hmm
quarters. Um, but yeah, this is an interesting story. We see this couple that are friends of the main character. I think his name's Eric. I think that's the main guy. I think
Yeah,
Eric
it is.
Johansson or Johnson, however you say it. And then there's a big thing where he goes out and tries to make peace with the Sand People and offers them water, which if anyone who's seen season 2, episode 1 of The Mandalorian, there's some very strong parallels with that
Mhm.
depiction of the Sand People. So because the Sand People are very territorial and suspicious of strangers, and they don't really interact or trade with anyone on Tatooine except in
And
very
technology too.
and
They're like
yeah,
fearful of
yeah,
technology.
right. But apparently, stealing blasters is okay because those
Um,
can or whatever slug thrower, machine gun, shotgun, carbines they find. Um, but yeah, I like this kind of drawn out like tension kind of thing where he slowly starts to get closer to them, and then actually, this is one of the most bittersweet stories. It's one of the saddest, I think, in the
yeah,
book because then he's close to the Jawas, so he has a close relationship with them, and then the other moisture farmers don't like the Jawas very much, and he's like, well, let's invite them to this wedding,
yeah.
and his friends are a little unsure at first, and then it becomes a joyous thing at first. They have this wedding, and the Jawas are there, and people are actually getting along,
And Wimitika is there.
and Wimatika is there from the earlier story,
Yeah.
and and then sadly, um, was it the Empire or the Tuscan Raiders that attack?
It was the people of the sand, the
Yes, it was the
Tuscans.
people of the sand,
Yeah.
um, the Sand Tuscans. Um, they they came, and I think it was basically stoked because I think other moisture farmers were just distrustful, and they said you need to stop trading with the
I
Sand
think
people.
what if I remember correctly, what it was is the um, there's the adolescent sand people needed to like prove themselves to become
Yeah,
adults, and so
right.
they were it was actually a group of adolescent uh, Tuscans that
Sand persons.
attacked.
Yeah,
Yes, attacked and killed Even, I think is his name,
yeah, yeah.
and then
That's right.
stole
The
his
the
betrothed.
fiance. Yeah,
Yeah,
and and again,
Aurelia,
this is written before Attack of the
Aurel,
Clones. So
Aurelia.
it
I think that's
yeah,
how you
that's
pronounce her name.
that's right. This is written before Attack of the Clones, so it's interesting that there was parallels where we see the Sand People steal someone and kidnap them basically for
Yeah,
whether ritualistic reasons or just to torture or to prove a point to the other moisture farmers. Um, that's why this anthology was great. It tied into later stories from Lucas himself.
it was very
Um,
Western. It came off
yeah,
as very
yeah.
Western-esque. You know, you got the frontiersmen and
Hmm.
the indigenous population that's not well understood, and
Right. And
it's just
then
like a '60s Western.
yep. And then later on, Eric, he ends up following the movie events, I think, where he learns of the attack on the Jawa Sandcrawler. And I can't remember exactly how it connects with him going to the cantina, other than, okay, so he had this map and he's trying to create this thing where everyone can get along. And as the story goes on, his dreams are shattered, basically. So the Tuscan Raiders attack the humans, the Empire is coming into this, and his dreams of peace are totally shattered. And it ends with him going into Mos Eisley to kind of find himself, I guess, and to hopefully go somewhere or do something. I think he even um, dreams about possibly joining the rebellion, I think, if I remember. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts on this one?
Um, Not anything in particular, but they did. There's that part at the wedding, I think, or maybe it was at one of the meetings or something beforehand,
Mhm.
where I think it was the wedding. The Lars didn't show up. You know,
Yes.
they make
Yes. And
mention of
someone
Lars.
pointed out that it was strange because,
Yeah,
like, they got invited, and yeah,
I
that
think I
that
think
was
even I think
yeah.
even he had mentioned that maybe he'd go stay with the Lars or something. I don't
Yes,
remember.
something like that. That sounds familiar.
I don't remember, but yeah, it was really good. I liked the story. The ending was a little like
I think it was
cheesy.
too quick. It was too quick. It just like boom, he's there in the cantina. I think he sees Luke. He recognizes Luke,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's like, and then he kind of thinks like, what happened to Owen and Baru? Like, but then it just kind of wraps up too quick. It's just like boom, he sees them
yeah,
come in, and no other events after that. It just kind of, you know,
yeah.
wraps up.
Well, it's like how else do you end it? I mean, you could kill him, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, he
but
does think of the rebellion. He says there was the rebellion. The Empire had driven me into rebellion, he says.
yeah,
And so he's thinking about it. And he says, I took another drink for courage, but before I could move, Onan Bru's nephew, Luke, walked in with somebody I didn't know. and 2 droids that got ordered out. And then he starts wondering about where are Owen and Beru. So he keeps thinking of the rebellion. It just kind of ends like that, and it says, "We would draw the maps of peace." So it's like, okay,
Yeah,
there
it's
you go.
cheesy.
We don't know who he is.
If I was going to make a change, if I was the editor on that story, I would make it so he recognized Ben as
Right.
Ben,
That
the
makes
weirdo
sense.
who lives out
Yeah.
in the desert,
Right.
and I would have him not join the rebellion.
Because
Right?
everybody does.
Yeah, it's so
Every
cliche. It's so
yeah.
cliche.
Granted, it was written in 1995, 94, 95 when it was published. So it was at the beginning of our Star Wars story cliches.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Sort
mean, it became cliche.
really cliche because they're still doing that thing where Imperials are defecting to the rebellion, like in Battlefront 2.
Mhm.
And people are just like, "Come on, can't we have an Imperial be an Imperial for an entire story without
Right.
having second thoughts?"
Right.
So
That's it. Other than that, I really liked it. I liked the whole thing, drawing the maps and
yeah,
interacting with the Tuscan Raiders, and
there was a lot
him
of good stuff on
him
Tatooine that weren't Mos Eisley.
yeah, and more Jawa stuff. I like that. Him having the little
Yes,
powwow with the Jawas and going to the little
absolutely.
their clan hall or whatever.
Yeah,
Their
actually,
headquarters.
when they have that scene, I think they might even mention torches on the wall, or it's like a thing. I think of Spaceballs when they go
Like
down
dink
in the little
dinks.
dink
Yeah,
dink
with
dink.
yogurt.
Yeah, that's what I imagine when I think of the Jawa fortress in this book.
That's exactly
So,
it. Yeah.
yep, torches on the wall. Spaceballs, the flamethrower. So anyway, last story on our list here. We have One Last Night in the Mos Eisley Cantina, The Tale of the Wolf Man and the Lamproid by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. This one is very different also, not typical compared to the other short stories. I want to briefly mention that Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens, that's quite a mouthful, they were primarily known for Star Trek books. That was like their main thing. Because I've just glanced through Star Trek books from the 80s and 90s, and their
How
name is on a
could
lot.
you?
Yeah,
How
I know.
could you?
I betrayed everybody. Hey,
Traitor.
you're the one who collected the figures, so don't talk to me about betrayal. But we love Star Trek, whatever. It's different. But I never read the Star Trek novels. But whenever I would glance over and just kind of flip through or whatever, I would see their name a lot. They were, in fact, Anne Crispin, also of the Han Solo trilogy. She also wrote a couple Star Trek novels. So
that's
they're
the
well
thing with
known.
this. That's the thing with the novels too. There was a time where I'd be at the bookstore and I'd look at, glance over at the Star Trek novels, look at the
I know
Star
what you're going to
Wars,
say.
and it would be like, at least all of this is canon. All these books are canon. The Star Wars books matter. All this mess of Star Trek books, it's just chaos, right?
Yes.
And now all that stuff is not canon. it's relegated to the same thing.
Well,
That is the old EU.
Actually, what I thought you were going to say, but which you made a great point. But what I thought you were going to say is that in the 90s, you would look at the Star Trek section and see hundreds of books, literally hundreds.
Yeah. Well,
I think there was at least 150 to 200 then.
That's kind of it, right? Like that's part of it, because if there's no strong canon,
yeah,
you can
you
green light
crank 'em out.
anything. You just green light anything. Oh yeah,
Right.
this story sounds good.
Right. But so there was like looking at a giant mountain from the bottom and just being overwhelmed and going, well, I'm going to stick with my Star Wars novels because there's only 15 or 20 of those.
Yeah.
Now, look at us in 2021. I believe the number of adult Star Wars novels is upwards of, it's multiple hundreds. It's close to Star Trek numbers.
Are we there now?
Yeah, we're there. If you include like YA, we are somewhere in the 400 plus range.
Well, and
300 or 400.
And obviously, I stopped with the New Jedi Order, and so there's everything post New Jedi Order that I missed, and there's a lot. Those two, the Legacy and Fate series, they're pretty big.
Right. Anyway.
Yes.
A bit of a tangent, but it ties into this because I did want to mention the parallels with the authors here. this is an interesting story. So it's the Wolfman who we know and love, who's been virtually deleted from the special edition. So and all subsequent renditions of Star Wars.
His
Although if you
voice is
look in
still
the
there.
voice is still there. Although if you look in the background, he's still there in a couple background shots, but it's because he was done in pickup shots. The establishing cantina footage, he's not there, and you wouldn't see him because some of those aliens were filmed in L.A. months later for pickups.
Yeah.
So like Hammerhead, he wasn't there in the establishing shots. Wolfman was another. I think even Labria was a pickup shoot later.
Yeah.
And I think it was Rick Baker. He came in and kind of perked up the cantina because Lucas wasn't happy with the original cut.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Wolfman, this is a story that flashes in and out of these weird, almost dream sequences where he's in the cantina at different points in time, but then he's also flashing back to taking part in the Battle of Hoth on the ground where the Lamproid, which is named Dice Ibegon, that's like his love, and that's the weird, strange. That's the strange tentacled creature. He's like kind of looks at him.
Right.
She has this voice in the story, and she seems to speak like normal basic, and they have this relationship. They've known each other seemingly for years. They're like soulmates, and so they're flashing in and out of. You don't know where you're grounded in this story because the cantina flashes forward in time to like after Return of the Jedi, and there's like no one, and it's at night, and there's the sounds of like sirens and burning outside, like it's after the Death Star and the Empire fell.
Yeah, I think the anchor, the actual time frame is the Battle of Endor.
You're right.
He's flashing back to the cantina and Hoth.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it's like your life flashes before your eyes, kind of thing, and it's a weird, surreal story, but it's actually written really well, and it's very romantic, and I like it. It's strange, but I like it.
Yeah, I liked it too. It's another one where it's kind of weird, sort of like Night Lily, where it's two very. This time it's two very different species. Getting the hots for each other, and that's a little weird because one's basically a lamprey at a bar.
Right.
But I like the whole the thing with the force and the jumping around. It reminded me of the pathways of the force from Rebels.
The worlds between worlds kind of thing.
Yeah. And
very much.
Yeah. So I couldn't, you kind of, okay. So it's definitely not like a near-death experience or like a life flashing before your eyes type thing because the timeline, even in the Battle of Endor, is pretty long because he's at the initial battle and he kind of gets damaged and then he's
going towards the surface of Endor.
Yeah, he's flying down to the moon and stuff, but he does eventually die. But all of that stuff is happening over the course of, I guess, probably hours or an hour or something.
Right.
So it's definitely something that's tied into the Force because because Dice, Dice is Force sensitive at least.
It's definitely implied. Here's an interesting thing. I swear it's strange. I didn't pick up on this until my last rereading. And I've read this about 5 times over the last nearly 26 years. During the Battle of Endor segment, it's quoting one of the scenes in the movie when Akbar says, "The shield is down, commence attack on the Death Star's main reactor." And then it says, Lando says, "We're on our way, red group, gold group." And when you read the line here, it says, "Raw cheering voices, human and Bothan, Mon Calamari and Bith, even a droid who announced it had always wanted to do this."
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that's from?
It sounds familiar. When I read that part, I was like, what is that droid?
I've always wanted to do this.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Star Tours.
Yeah, Star Tours. That's right.
I didn't notice that until now on my last reading. I just read it and thought, oh, okay, it's a droid that never had always wanted to do that. And I was like, oh my gosh.
But that's a different Death Star. Yeah.
I know. So it doesn't quite, but nevertheless, kudos to them for trying to work a Star Tours reference in, because I'm a Star Tours fanboy,
Oh
obviously.
yeah,
'Cause I
dude.
mentioned that at Celebration to the Timothy's on. I mentioned it like, hey, thanks for using Rex and the Star Speeders in the Hand of Thrawn books, because it's just cool to have any little tidbit. So that was really funny. I noticed that in the story, and yeah, it's this one's a little bittersweet, kind of like the previous story, but it's really good, and I think it has a really gorgeous ending. Which you know, it's kind of like he sees the spirits of Ben and Anakin. It says right here, Dice led Sivrak through the forest of Endor's Moon to a special place near an Ewok village where three friends waited, as they had always waited, as they
Yeah,
always
that
would
from a
wait.
technical standpoint, I didn't like that.
Right.
Not that like Jedi necessarily have a monopoly
On
on
Ghost.
force, persistence, right?
Yeah,
Because that's like the sticking point from the prequels was maintaining your individuality
yeah, your
within the
personality.
force.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
which
true.
obviously there could be, the galaxy's huge. There could be certain races that it's easier for them, or they have that knowledge or something,
Yeah,
because it was something that was they had and they lost, right? That was
yeah,
the other
yeah,
thing. It was like
yeah.
knowledge that had been lost. So that's
Which
not that
is
big of a deal.
Yeah, it was kind
Um,
of implied because in older Tales of the Jedi stories, every Jedi disappeared.
right.
So that, yeah,
So it
that
was
would
like
be a
common
nice
knowledge
little
at that point.
retcon. Right.
Um,
Yeah. But yeah, what do you think of the story overall? Any other
I really
notes?
liked it. It was like totally different, and it dealt with the force, and that the time jumping was really interesting, especially the fact that they were both on Hoth, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Dice dies on Hoth.
Yes.
And there was also a blurb which with that where he immolates her after she dies because he
Hmm.
wanted to avoid Dice being experimented on by the
Yeah.
Imperials, which I thought
Right.
was a little like that was kind of the whole Nazi World War II Axis power
Hmm.
cliche of the Empire being, you know, a
Space
stand-in
Nazis.
for space Nazis, yeah, or specifically space, Japanese Imperials, maybe more so with that
Right.
um,
Yeah.
that one base they had. I don't remember what it's
Right.
called,
Right.
735 or something in China.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
experimented on people, but the Nazis did it too.
Right.
So I thought that was a little cliche, but overall I liked it, and I especially liked that they integrated Hoth and the fact that she
Hmm.
died there.
Yeah.
Um, then
Yeah. And yeah, so with the ending, with them walking off as kind of ghosts into the Ewok village, it does have a very wrap up feeling because, it's like the end of that trilogy and it ties into A New Hope. And I love the last line in the book. And behind them in the forest, the music from the cantina softly faded and was never heard again. It's just like, I don't know, very poetic, very romantic, um,
yeah, yeah, it was
a
a good way to end the
perfect
book.
line. Yes, absolutely. And then I don't need to go into it, but there is a contributor biographies to learn about all the authors. I think that's on your ebook version, is it not?
Yeah, it screwed up my my
Your page count.
my pace because I thought
Yeah,
I thought I was
percentage.
way you had way more left.
Right. Um Overall, revisiting Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina now, over 25 years later. Overall, what do you think of this anthology?
Um, I'm not one to go back and reread books that
Hmm.
often. It's very rare. But I always like short story anthologies, whether it be Star Wars or I used to be a huge Stephen King fan, and his short story anthologies are good. They're it's good. It still holds up, and it's still relevant because a lot of these characters, their stories and their backgrounds and stuff won't be necessarily affected by new canon,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's still worth going back and reading. Even probably the other Tales books, like Tales from Jabba's Palace.
Hmm.
Um,
I revisited that a couple times, not as much as this one, but yeah.
and the Bounty Hunter, Tales of the Bounty Hunters and stuff too. Um, so yeah, it holds up. It's good.
Yeah.
There's some stuff that like as a much older adult now reading it, I'm just like, oh man, that's really
Greedo.
yeah. It's like that's not that good. That's not that
Yeah,
good. But
sensibilities changed so much from, I mean, we were about 15 when this book came out. Now we're almost 41. It's like there's a huge swath of time. You know what's funny is I actually
and those
remember
authors too, right? Like
Oh
some of those
yeah.
authors, like if hopefully most of them are still able to stay in the business and keep writing and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I would be interested to see how they've grown as
Yeah.
authors too.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of them have continued to write for Star Wars, obviously, like Timothy Zahn. He might be the only one in here that has written for the new canon. Because
Probably.
Tom Veitch, who wrote Dark Empire, he never did anything past Empire's End comic series, which came out the same year as this anthology. Kathy Tyers, I think, had another short story or two in '96 and maybe '97 in the Adventure Journal. And Crispin, of course, had the Han Solo trilogy a couple years after this. Dave Wolverton, who wrote The Sandtender, The Hammerhead's Tale, he later wrote the first book in the Jedi Apprentice series, which I mentioned on the part one of this retrospective. But everybody else, even Kevin J. Anderson, who by the late 90s had kind of hung up his Star Wars mantle, just kind of like, I'm done. I cranked out a bunch and now I'm done. Or people were done with him. I don't
No,
know.
you know what I think it is he moved on to Dune.
Yes, actually, that's very true.
That's probably the
Dune,
primary reason, because him
yes,
and Herbert's son spearheaded that for a long time.
they still are because I think they even wrote a tie-in novel that ties into the Dune reboot. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, he's become a huge part of the Duneverse, that's for sure. And then he's also, of course,
Universe.
what it is. And then he also did a whole trilogy with Neil Peart from Rush, where it was the Clockwork Angels. That was the first book, and then there was like some other ones. I can't remember the titles, but they tied into the lyrics of Rush's last studio album. So, and anyway, that's a whole other thing. Kevin J. Anderson will probably. I think it's safe to say we will do a Kevin J. Anderson retrospective at some point because
Oh man, somebody
yeah,
got
I
to
know.
read his stuff.
Dark Saber coming your way.
I
In the
I
90s,
liked him though.
in the 90s, he was the Star Wars ambassador.
Uh
Like,
huh.
he had tons of novels. He co-wrote the comics, Tales of the Jedi. So he was the guy, and you would see him interviewed in all the magazines. And but then yeah, after I think his last thing was Bane of the Sith, a short story about Darth Bane in Star Wars Gamer magazine, I believe number 3, and that was in 2001. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was his last thing. So I actually, for one, would love to see the return of Kevin J. Anderson to
Oh,
the new
dude,
canon.
he is salivating at the thought of recanonizing Kip Duran and Admiral Dalla. I know it.
Right,
He
right.
is just waiting in the wings. He's like, oh
Oh
man.
yeah.
He's like calling up Zahn. He's like, oh man, you got to recanonize Thrawn. Oh, I can't wait. I know they're gonna call any day, any
Durga
second
the
now.
Hutt. Yeah, Durga the Hutt.
Turg of
Canon.
the Yeah, forgot about that.
Anyway,
No, I liked
anyway,
Kevin. I liked Kevin J. Anderson. I probably
I
read
did
all
too.
of his stuff. I
I
read
did.
all the Young Jedi Knight books that he wrote with
That's right.
his wife.
Right.
I
Right. And
enjoyed
I only read a
those.
couple. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I tore through those.
Yeah, and it's easy to do because they weren't big, huge, long reads or anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina. It's a beloved anthology for me. Like I said, I've read it and read it a bunch over the years. I got my dog-eared, beat-up paperback in my hands right now, and it's I love it. It's possibly on a good day my number one Star Wars paperback.
There you
So
go. I mean, you can't get a better endorsement than that, I guess.
absolutely. And yeah, that about wraps it up for this podcast episode. Remember, you can reach us on YouTube. Just look up Star Wars Unfiltered. We are on Facebook, and you can leave us questions or comments at Yahoo at StarWarsUnfiltered@yahoo.com. We are at Instagram, where the daily posting continues to go strong for over 2 weeks now. I haven't given it up, still chugging away with new posts. And yeah, just reach out to us, and we'd love to hear your comments, questions.
And eventually
And
we'll get on other platforms.
Eventually we will. You'll be hearing this on iTunes or Google Play or whatever the cool thing that kids are using these days.
The
for their
$100
podcast.
million Spotify deal is in the works. Just
right.
like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, until next episode, take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Hey, what is Admiral Akbar's favorite type of music?
What?
Rap. Oh.